Look at this woman. By the evening of November 14th, 2023, ELENA Corvus had settled into an absolute routine. Routine is dangerous because it feels safe. This is the last documented moment ELENA Corvus was seen as a free person. In the far left of the frame, a dark sedan sat motionless, engine off, where it had been parked for 3 hours. At 18:43, 23-year-old ELENA Corvus entered the frame from the stairwell, her breath visible in the cold air. She passed the dark sedan. Its brake lights flared red, illuminating the wall. By the evening of November 14th, 2023, ELENA Corvus had settled into an absolute routine. She clocked out of her graphic design shift at Meridian Creative Solutions in downtown Portland at exactly 6 o'clock each evening. Co-workers later described her mood that day as light, unburdened. She had plans to meet her younger sister Diane for dinner at a Thai restaurant 7 blocks from her apartment. The reservation was set for 7. Digital forensics would later recover her final text message, sent at 18:41 from the 3rd floor stairwell of the Garfield Street parking structure. It read, "Just walking to the car. Freezing out here. Order me the fries." The message was casual, punctuated with a snowflake emoji. It anchored her in a reality that felt entirely safe. She believed, in that moment, that she was alone. The camera knew otherwise. The alarm did not sound immediately. It began as a low static of confusion, the kind that settles over families when communication simply stops. At 19:15, Diane Corvus sent a follow-up text from the restaurant booth. "Where are you?" It went unread. By 20:30, the silence had hardened into worry. ELENA's roommate, Jessica Huang, called her phone from their shared apartment on Belmont Avenue. It rang 4 times before diverting to voicemail. The timeline of the disappearance would later be defined not by what happened, but by the cessation of digital life. ELENA's GPS location froze at the coordinates of the parking structure at 18:44. When ELENA's mother, Patricia Corvus, entered the Portland Police Bureau's Central Precinct on the morning of November 15th, she was met with bureaucratic friction. The reporting officer, a 12-year veteran named Sergeant Howard Mills, noted that ELENA was a 23-year-old adult with no history of mental illness, no known enemies, and no indication of suicidal ideation. The missing person report, filed at 10:07 a.m. and assigned case number MP 2023-1847, classified the disappearance as voluntary missing person, adult. This designation, standard for cases lacking evidence of foul play, delayed the mobilization of major crimes resources by 48 hours. "Adults have the right to disappear," Sergeant Mills explained to Patricia, his tone not unkind, but procedurally detached. "We see this every week. Most come back within 72 hours. Patricia Corvus would later testify that she knew, in that fluorescent-lit lobby, that her daughter was not coming back on her own. The investigation began, not with a siren, but with a slow administrative crawl. While law enforcement waited for the mandatory period to elapse, the Corvus family mobilized. By the afternoon of November 16th, Patricia, Diane, and ELENA's older brother Michael had retraced her steps to the Garfield Street parking structure. They stood on level 3, in the spot where ELENA usually parked, space 3-47, isolated near the north stairwell. The fluorescent tubes above flickered with an irregular rhythm. Their footsteps echoed against concrete walls. They scoured the oil-stained floor for physical traces, a key, a receipt, a strand of hair. They found nothing. It was here, amidst the distant slam of car doors from floors below, that Michael noticed a camera dome mounted on a concrete pillar 12 feet above the ground. He photographed the serial number and forwarded it to Detective Linda Vasquez, the missing persons officer assigned to the case. It was the first piece of actionable intelligence in the investigation, generated not by police work, but by the terrifying momentum of a family refusing to wait for the system. On November 17th, the investigation formally pivoted. Detective Vasquez subpoenaed the surveillance footage from Garfield Street Parking Management. Two officers sat in a windowless review room at Central Precinct, scrolling through hours of static imagery on a monitor that hummed with electrical warmth. The boredom broke at timestamp 15:30, 3 hours before Elena arrived. A dark gray sedan, windows tinted beyond legal limits, pulled into space 346, directly adjacent to Elena's usual spot. The driver did not exit. For 180 minutes, the vehicle sat motionless in the sodium-lit shadows. Analysis of archived footage revealed a pattern that chilled the investigators. The same sedan had entered the structure on November 10th, 11th, and 13th. Each time, it arrived approximately 20 minutes before Elena. Each time, it departed moments after she did. The suspect had not just been waiting on November 14th. He had been learning. He had memorized her schedule down to the minute. The camera captured the geometry of predation. The vehicle registration search returned a name within hours. Marcus Thorne, 34 years old, a logistics driver for a regional shipping company. His address was a basement apartment on Southeast Division Street. His record showed 2 prior complaints for stalking behavior, both dismissed when the complainants declined to press charges. On the morning of November 20th, a tactical team executed a search warrant on Thorne's residence. The basement smelled of mildew and stale coffee. Inside a desk drawer, hidden beneath a stack of tax documents, they found a spiral-bound notebook. Its pages contained dates, times, and descriptions of women's clothing. Blue coat, 1805. Red scarf, 1802. Gray sweater, phone in left hand, 1811. The entries spanned 3 months. Elena Corvus appeared on 14 pages. Detective Vasquez held the notebook under the bare ceiling bulb and felt the weight of documented obsession in her hands. It was a log of Elena's life, written by the man who appeared to have ended it. Marcus Thorne was brought in for interrogation on November 20th at 1400. He sat in interview room 2, a windowless box with acoustic tile walls and a one-way mirror. His demeanor was calm, bordering on bored. He answered preliminary questions with monosyllabic detachment. But when Detective Vasquez mentioned his sedan, Thorne's posture shifted. He became agitated, his fingers drumming against the metal table. When she requested consent to search his vehicle, he refused. "You need a warrant for that," he said, his voice rising. The warrant was obtained by 1700. The sedan was impounded and transported to the forensic garage on North Interstate Avenue. Technicians in white Tyvek suits documented the exterior, then turned their attention to the trunk. The air inside smelled faintly of copper and something organic. Under ultraviolet light, the carpet lining showed no visible staining, but luminol would tell a different story. The garage fell silent as they prepared the chemical spray. November 21st, 2023. The forensic garage at 0300. Technicians sealed the doors and extinguished the overhead lights. The only illumination came from the pale glow of instrument panels. A technician sprayed the trunk lining with luminol solution in slow, methodical passes. They waited. The reaction was immediate and devastating. A ghostly, electric blue luminescence bloomed across the carpet near the spare tire well, spreading in an irregular pattern that suggested pooling and contact transfer. Luminol reacts with the iron in hemoglobin, producing chemiluminescence visible only in darkness. Someone had been bleeding in this trunk. The volume suggested massive blood loss, potentially fatal. Detective Vasquez stood at the edge of the forensic bay, watching the blue glow pulse and fade. The lead forensic technician, Dr. Alan Reeves, turned to her and said only one word. "Gotcha." The case against Marcus Thorne appeared overwhelming. The evidence seemed to speak with damning clarity. But evidence, as the investigation would soon reveal, does not always say what it appears to. The case seemed closed. The surveillance footage showed Thorne watching ELENA. The notebook proved obsessive surveillance. The luminol reaction indicated blood in his trunk. Prosecutors began preparing charges. Then the phone rang in the homicide division on the morning of November 24th. The DNA results were in. Detective Vasquez read the report twice, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. The blood in the trunk was not a familial match to ELENA Corvus. It was not human blood at all. The DNA matched Odocoileus virginianus, white-tailed deer. Marcus Thorne was not a killer. He was a poacher, illegally transporting game to avoid losing his hunting license after exceeding his seasonal limit. The evidentiary architecture collapsed. The prime suspect was a predator, yes, a man who watched women without their knowledge or consent, but he was innocent of ELENA's disappearance. The investigation had followed the evidence to a dead end. Somewhere, the real perpetrator remained unidentified, and ELENA Corvus was still missing. Detectives returned to interview room 2 on November 24th at 1600. They placed the lab report on the table in front of Marcus Thorne. They showed him photographs of deer blood patterns matching the luminol reaction. They told him, flatly, that he was no longer a suspect in ELENA's disappearance. But they also told him something else. You were watching her, which means you saw who took her. Thorne's demeanor changed. His ego, wounded by the humiliation of the deer blood revelation, demanded rehabilitation. He wanted to prove he was the superior observer, the one who noticed what others missed. He opened his notebook to the page dated November 14th. In the margin, scribbled in pencil, was a note the detectives had initially overlooked. VAN 643. Thorne explained that he had not exited his vehicle that evening because someone else was already there. Behind the concrete pillar, in the camera's blind spot, there had been a white van with service markings. Thorne's account was delivered with the unsettling precision of a man who had spent years cataloging the movements of strangers. The white van bore the logo of Garfield Street Building Maintenance, a simple geometric design that ELENA would have recognized instantly. She had seen it dozens of times. On the elevator inspection certificates, on the service notices posted in the stairwell, on the uniforms of the men who kept the building operational. A man in a gray uniform had stepped out as ELENA approached her vehicle. He did not grab her. He did not run. He walked toward her with the unhurried confidence of someone who belonged. Thorne watched from his sedan, 17 feet away, as the man gestured toward the north stairwell. He appeared to be explaining something. A maintenance issue. Perhaps a gas leak warning. Perhaps an elevator malfunction that required tenants to use the south exit. ELENA had nodded. She knew this man. Not personally, but categorically. He was infrastructure. He was the person you trusted because trusting him was automatic. Building records would later confirm that Arthur Vane had serviced the elevator on level 3 twice in the previous month. ELENA had likely passed him in the hallway. She may have held the door for him. She may have smiled politely as he stepped aside to let her enter the elevator first. This was the architecture of her trust, built not from personal relationship, but from the accumulated weight of institutional familiarity. Vane had worn his uniform like camouflage. He had positioned his van in the camera's blind spot with the knowledge of someone who had studied the surveillance grid. He had waited for the moment she would be alone, distracted, looking at her phone. When he approached her, he did not need to force compliance. He only needed to say the words she expected to hear. "Ma'am, there's been a chemical spill in the stairwell. I need to escort you to the south exit." She followed him to the van. She entered the passenger side voluntarily. The timestamp read 1844. The van departed at 1846. The investigation restarted with a cold, focused urgency. Parking access logs showed a white maintenance van exiting Level 3 at 1846 on November 14th. Vehicle tracking through the structure's automated toll system confirmed the license plate. Oregon registration 847-MXV, assigned to Garfield Street Properties, LLC. Employment records identified the driver assigned to that vehicle on the evening shift. Arthur Vane, 41 years old. An elevator technician employed by the building for 7 years. His personnel file painted the portrait of an invisible man. No complaints, no disciplinary actions. Annual performance reviews described him as quiet, reliable, punctual. He had master key access to every floor of the structure. He knew the camera placements, the blind spots, the shift change schedules of security personnel. He did not need to study Elena's routine from a parked car like Thorne. He was part of the building's infrastructure. He moved through its spaces without generating suspicion, because generating suspicion was structurally impossible for a man in his position. Detective Vasquez pulled Vane's complete employment history and found something that had escaped initial review. In 2019, a female tenant in a building Vane serviced had filed an informal complaint stating that he made her uncomfortable, that he seemed to appear in hallways at odd hours, that he once commented on her perfume. The complaint was never formalized. It existed only as a handwritten note in an HR file, dismissed as interpersonal awkwardness. 4 years later, the note read like a warning no one had heard. Investigators also discovered that Vane's van had been logged exiting the Garfield Street structure on 7 occasions in the 2 weeks prior to November 14th, each time between 1830 and 1900, the window when Elena typically departed. He had been watching her, too. But unlike Thorne, who watched from obsession without intent, Vane watched with operational purpose. He was selecting. He was timing. He was rehearsing. The geometry of his planning revealed itself in the access logs. A patient, methodical predator who understood that the most dangerous place is often the one that feels most routine. The fluorescent lights of Level 3 had illuminated Elena's path for months. They had also illuminated her predator's path. The cameras recorded both. They understood neither. Arthur Vane was arrested without incident at his residence on Southeast 82nd Avenue at 06:15 on November 25, 2023. He answered the door in a bathrobe, holding a coffee mug. He did not resist. He did not speak. He watched the tactical team secure his apartment with the detached calm of a man who had been expecting this moment. Inside, investigators found a locked filing cabinet in the basement. It contained 17 driver's licenses, all belonging to women, all reported lost or stolen over the previous decade. Elena's license was not among them. These were trophies from encounters that had never been reported, from women who had perhaps never realized how close they had come. The forensic examination of his white van began at 0900. Luminol revealed no blood in the cargo area, but cadaver dogs alerted on the passenger seat and floor mat. DNA analysis confirmed the presence of Elena's skin cells on the seatbelt buckle, the door handle, and the dashboard ventilation grill. Her fingerprint was recovered from the interior of the passenger window, a partial palm print, pressed against the glass as if she had been bracing herself or trying to signal. A gas station attendant named Roger Whitfield came forward on November 26th. He had worked the night shift at a Chevron station 14 miles north of Portland on November 14th. He remembered a white maintenance van stopping for fuel at approximately 1930. He remembered the driver. A quiet guy, gray uniform, didn't make eye contact. He also remembered something else. The sound of a single knock from inside the van's cargo area. "I thought it was equipment shifting," Whitfield testified. "I didn't think about it until I saw the news." His statement was logged as Exhibit 47-C. The search area was established using cell tower triangulation of Vane's personal phone. Between 1945 and 21:30 on November 14th, his device had pinged a single tower serving a rural zone 20 miles north of the city. Cadaver dogs were deployed on November 27th. The search covered 12 square miles of dense woodland, following service roads that Vane would have known from his previous employment with a regional utility company. At 14:47, a handler named Officer Diana Morales reported an alert from her dog, a Belgian Malinois named Casper. The alert was located 73 meters from Service Road 9 in a shallow depression beneath a fallen Douglas fir. ELENA Corvus was found, still wearing the blue winter coat visible in the final surveillance footage. The girl had a broken nose, and there were signs of rape. Arthur Vane was arrested without incident at his residence on Southeast 82nd Avenue at 6:15 on November 25, 2023. He answered the door in a bathrobe, holding a coffee mug. He did not resist. He did not speak. He watched the tactical team secure his apartment with the detached calm of a man who had been expecting this moment. Inside, investigators found a locked filing cabinet in the basement. It contained 17 driver's licenses, all belonging to women, all reported lost or stolen over the previous decade. Elena's license was not among them. These were trophies from encounters that had never been reported, from women who had perhaps never realized how close they had come. The forensic examination of his white van began at 900. Luminol revealed no blood in the cargo area, but cadaver dogs alerted on the passenger seat and floor mat. DNA analysis confirmed the presence of Elena's skin cells on the seatbelt buckle, the door handle, and the dashboard ventilation grill. Her fingerprint was recovered from the interior of the passenger window, a partial palm print, pressed against the glass as if she had been bracing herself or trying to signal. A gas station attendant named Roger Whitfield came forward on November 26th. He had worked the night shift at a Chevron station 14 miles north of Portland on November 14th. He remembered a white maintenance van stopping for fuel at approximately 19:30. He remembered the driver, a quiet guy, gray uniform, didn't make eye contact. He also remembered something else, the sound of a single knock from inside the van's cargo area. "I thought it was equipment shifting," Whitfield testified. "I didn't think about it until I saw the news." His statement was logged as Exhibit 47-C. The search area was established using cell tower triangulation of Vane's personal phone. Between 1945 and 21:30 on November 14th, his device had pinged a single tower serving a rural zone 20 miles north of the city. Cadaver dogs were deployed on November 27th. The search covered 12 square miles of dense woodland, following service roads that Vane would have known from his previous employment with a regional utility company. At 14:47, a handler named Officer Diana Morales reported an alert from her dog, a Belgian Malinois named Casper. The alert was located 73 meters from Service Road 9 in a shallow depression beneath a fallen Douglas fir. ELENA Corvus was found still wearing the blue winter coat visible in the final surveillance footage. The trial of Arthur Vane commenced on May 6, 2025, in Multnomah County Circuit Court. The prosecution presented 847 pieces of physical evidence, 19 witness testimonies, and 3 expert forensic analyses. Vane sat motionless at the defense table throughout the proceedings, his expression unreadable, his gray eyes fixed on a point somewhere above the jury box. He did not testify during the evidentiary phase. His defense attorney argued procedural violations in the search warrant application, arguments the judge dismissed. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 47 minutes before returning a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, and unlawful disposal of human remains. The sentencing hearing was held on May 14, 2025. Before the judge pronounced sentence, Vane exercised his right to make a statement. He rose slowly, adjusted his glasses, and spoke in a voice so calm that several jurors later described it as robotic. His statement lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. It was recorded in full and entered into the court record as Exhibit 412A. "I watched her for 11 days, Vane said. Every evening, she walked through that garage looking at her phone, smiling at messages from people who loved her. She never looked up. She never looked around. She walked through the world like it was safe, like nothing could touch her. That kind of trust, that kind of blindness, it's not innocence. It's arrogance. She believed she was untouchable because no one had ever shown her otherwise. I wanted to show her. I wanted to see the exact moment when she understood that the world was not what she thought it was. When she realized that the uniform she trusted was the thing that would end her. That moment, when her eyes changed, that was the only honest thing I've ever seen. Everything else is performance. Everyone else is pretending." She stopped pretending at 6:47 p.m. For 31 seconds, she was real. The courtroom was silent. Patricia Corvus sat in the front row of the gallery, her hands folded in her lap, her face expressionless. She did not cry. She did not look away. When the judge asked if she wished to make a victim impact statement, she rose, walked to the podium, and spoke a single sentence. "My daughter smiled at her phone because she was happy, and you turned that into something you could destroy." The judge sentenced Arthur Vane to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As he was led from the courtroom, he turned once to look at the gallery, not at Patricia, but at the empty space beside her, where ELENA would have sat. The surveillance camera on Level 3 North continues to record in silence. Its timestamp advances with mechanical indifference. It captured a stalker who committed no violence, and missed a maintenance worker who committed everything. At 1844, ELENA Corvus passed through its frame for the last time, smiling at her phone, unaware that the uniform waiting in the blind spot had already decided her fate.